Hello, I'm Peter Capsanis. Welcome to the Small Caps podcast. Today I'm joined by Fleta Solomon, the CEO of ASX-listed company Little Green Pharma. They've been in the news in recent weeks with a great story to tell. So let's get straight into it. Fleta, welcome to Small Caps.
Hi, Peter. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you on the show. Look, at the heart of it, you're a grower, you're a manufacturer, you're a distributor with this secret facility in WA, but you're more than that. You've gone global on us. But before we get into the detail, Fleta, I want to start with your story, with your backstory, and really the why. What spawned you to get involved in this industry to form Little Green Pharma?
Sure. And this is a really important point as well, because it has formed the vision and the ongoing purpose as to why this company exists. And we want that to resonate through the medicines that we produce. So I first became of a young child who was suffering many seizures a day from epilepsy, and like up to 70 seizures, and traditional medicines just weren't working, and she'd exhausted all options, and this poor darling girl just couldn't function. And the only thing that would actually stop was medicinal cannabis. And there was such a I guess there was a bit of a scrutiny at that time against cannabis as a medicinal product, and so they were battling sort of the societal what's right and what's wrong. Anyway, this was just remarkable medicine, and I realized then and there, sitting on a bench down in Yallingup, that wow, here we have this most remarkable opportunity to not only grow West Australian cannabis medicines for the rest of Australia and the world to use, and really change people's lives. But we can also explore how cannabis can be entered into the human body through drug delivery technologies that, again, is solving real patient problems. And it was at that moment that Little Green Pharma was born. And ever since then, we've had this vision to help literally hundreds and thousands of people across the globe, not only through our cannabis medicines, but in the delivery technologies that we're producing behind the scenes in the years to come.
Yeah, wow. So it must have had a profound impact on you, that little young girl. You were the first Australian company to penetrate the German market. Since then, you've tapped into the UK, France, and more recently, Denmark. The Danish deal, as it's been called, has been quite strategic because it means you've acquired a facility, something similar to what's in the background there, in the heart of Europe. What does this mean for Little Green Pharma and ultimately for its shareholders?
Yeah, so look, this was just such a logical strategic step for Little Green Pharma. And I've put this background up today because this is the facility. It's huge. She's beautiful. It's so majestic. It's gold-plated with everything that you could possibly want in a medicinal cannabis facility. And we were able to acquire this, on a really cost-effective basis. It was, if I can say, probably the wrong fit for the previous owner, the right fit for us. This facility, it hits all its optimization straps when it's operating at full capacity, and we have that need for it. We were the first in Australia to produce. We were the first Australian company to export. And what we've learned is that market share is partly obtained through being a first mover in a new industry, in a new market, because brand equity is everything. We've learned that the first few products or companies to go through are really the ones in the best seat to succeed. And so this is why the deal was so important to us, because not only is it a world-class facility, but it immediately delivers what we need in terms of our increased capacity right now. We were always going to build out and expand our West Australian facility. However, it was going to take more than 2 years just in permitting and licensing, as well as the construction. And that was going to cost us about 2.7 million per tonne. But this Danish acquisition, the facility was ready to go, all licensed, already producing, already exporting, and we managed to pick that up for 1 million per tonne. So I guess when you have a look at those metrics, they were very favourable. And it just, we feel that this particular facility has so much potential. it's like the shackles have been on this facility. It's been operating at 25%. Now it's been hamstrung with this limited capacity. And so I guess now we can take those shackles off and see what this facility really can do. So it's all about that rapid market penetration that we're focusing on and getting out to give those medicines to all these patients across the globe that need this as an additional or a therapeutic medicine.
Okay, well, we'll get into the take-up and the consumption of the medicine soon. Just if we can focus on Denmark a bit more, it came about with some backing from Hancock Prospecting, which is it's no stranger to WA mining. That's quite a significant investment, isn't it? It's good to have friends in those circles, so to speak.
Oh, look, thrilled to pieces, my goodness. We have some of the biggest investor names in Australia backing us or behind us, and we're just so thrilled. Like, it just gives us the confidence that these groups, these names, they like our model, they love our growth strategy, and I guess we've done a lot of the hard yards in sort of proving out our model and our vision and ticking all those boxes, saying, achieving what we say we're going to. And a lot of these investor groups have been involved with the business for some time, and they've really recognised that they support our model. So we're just so honoured and proud that they've chosen us to be the company in this sector.
Yeah. So now that you've acquired this facility in Denmark, literally in the heart of Europe, as I said, prior to COVID, you'd actually packed yourself up and moved to Switzerland to, I guess, drive the branding, the strategy, the growth, the market. You're already quite visionary, as we know. What does this mean now that you've acquired this facility in Denmark? Does this mean that you'll rapidly move back to Europe and Switzerland now that things are becoming, I guess, more normalised in a well, not so normal world at the moment, but there seems to be a bit of equilibrium coming into play with post-COVID-19.
Yeah, look, it's the reason that I left Australia to begin with. I positioned myself in Switzerland really to build up the European headquarters, because we've made no, there's no ambiguity about our goal. It's all about commercial sales volumes in these international markets, particularly in Europe, because it's such that the target market there, or the total addressable market, is huge. And it just made sense that, me as a CEO, as a leader, should be in the market where we want to be. And so the idea was to build up that the European headquarters, or the European base, just to be there. And COVID did happen. I was stranded in Switzerland and couldn't visit family and what have you. And so although it was difficult on the personal front, work-wise, it was still wonderful because I was in the same time zone, but everything was just done via Zoom video these days. And so I realised that I could do that from the office in Australia and be back with my team, who I hadn't seen in over a year. And it's very hard to be ingrained in culture and lead a team remotely. So I came back to Australia for a couple of months, and in that time we have acquired the Danish facility. And of course, for integration to happen smoothly and effectively, which is our key now post acquisition, we need to make sure that there's that really great cultural fit, and that we spend a significant amount of time in Denmark with the team, and vice versa. But of course, there's always a challenge with COVID. Leaving Australia is not so easy, and coming back in is even harder. So it's managing those. So look, we're working through that. Who's going to be spending that significant time over there? But we're looking forward to it because it's such a beautiful operation. The people are amazing. The cultural fit between the two groups it just fits like a glove. We've got 3 years experience in both operations in the pharma cannabis space, and it's really hard in that GMP, that good manufacturing practice, that laboratory level, to have that level of experience in such a new industry. Yes. You can't buy, and we've got that. And so we're just looking forward to putting the two teams together. So can't wait to get over there as soon as the borders open up just a little.
Yeah. So is Australian medicinal cannabis viewed as a safe and better product? And if so, why?
very early on, look, Australian product is always regarded as a very high produce. We're known for that agriculturally. And of course, our medicines are high end as well. What we do have, which is really significant worldwide, is our Therapeutic Goods Administration, so the TGA, when they issue our Good Manufacturing Practice license, which is a license required when you're manufacturing in Australia for human for medicines, human consumption. Now, this particular license is recognised by the European Union. And so through a mutual recognition agreement, so the EU basically says, look, our pharmacopoeia, the manufacturing of medicines, is very high. But Australia, we recognise the TGA. It's based on the same pharmacopoeia guidelines, so we will accept and recognise that quality. Now, that doesn't happen with many countries. And so, not only is Australia a wonderful country to be in because they legally allow the export of medical cannabis, but we've also got that EU GMP recognition. And so it actually makes us one of the first movers in the global medicinal cannabis space and one of the few companies globally that can actually deliver into Europe. So it just puts us in a really unique position. And that's why this accelerated, capturing of the market share is important to us with this Danish facility, because we've got that opportunity to deliver into Europe, not only with our Australian medicines, but now with the EU medicines, but at a much faster rate than if we were just to build out our Australian operations.
So, and Europe's definitely flying on the front foot first. That's quite clear. From the humble beginnings in the Southwest, and now you've captivated most of the continent, key areas of continental Europe. So who are your competitors? Which countries are your competitors?
I think you have to mention North America, so Canada. They've been years ahead of us. They're sort of 10 years ahead, but they don't quite have the same qualifications that we do with their GMP. They have to get additional EU licensing for their product to go into Europe. So as much as they're more advanced than us in certain areas, their focus really is on that recreational space, whereas our focus is on that medicinal space. But look, Germany is an upcoming country that's probably more a target market rather than so many competitors. But Israel's been going for a long time, and we tend to forget Israel, and they've had medicinal cannabis legalized for some time. So that's an interesting country. And of course, you've got some of the other European markets that are starting to open up. Portugal, for example, they've got a fair few growers and even manufacturers now. And the UK is just starting to issue some permits and some licenses. But you can see it's still quite in the infancy, and this is where Australian companies are really well positioned to take on that medicinal cannabis industry, because we are actually quite a fair way advanced, and we have those qualifications and the export allowances or licenses to be able to go into those European countries.
Fleta, you're, as we've already mentioned, you're across the supply chain from cultivator to production to distribution. How does this bode for the end user? That is, for the consumer, for the patient who's using this medicine, what does it mean for them?
Look, I think it gives the biggest benefit of being vertically integrated is having control over each activity of that supply chain. And I guess what that means is that we're not limited to third parties providing us with cannabis or doing the manufacturing or doing the packaging. We do it all ourselves. So the end result for our patients is a consistent medicine. It's high quality and it's reliable, so we don't have those supply interruptions because we have complete control.
What's the take-up of medicinal cannabis globally at the moment?
So in Australia, so closer to home, we've got about 130,000 SASB applications have been approved from the TGA. So it equates roughly, I'd say, to about 60,000 patients. We don't have a clear cut on any of these numbers. Of those 60,000 patients that have been prescribed cannabis medicines, about 45,000 of those are active patients right now. That's expected to increase to, say, 70,000 patients by the end of the year. So,
wow.
Some numbers. If we look at Canada, that's a country that's been doing this, as I mentioned, for 10 years or so. They had, by the end of 2019, upwards of 350,000 patients. But those numbers have been a bit skewed now purely because they've gone into a recreational market. So a lot of the medicinal cannabis users are getting that recreationally now. So the numbers are a bit hard to follow. In Germany, you're roughly looking at, let's call it 130,000 patients. Israel has 70,000 patients. In France, there's a cannabis trial happening in France right now for 3,000 patients. That's run by the government. Little Green Pharma products are being prescribed for that. So we're thrilled to pieces to be in that emerging country. And then the UK is a bit slower than what we had thought UK would do. We're thinking they've got between 2,000 and 5,000 patients only at this time, which is quite slow, and it's really where Australia was probably 3 years ago. So you can see where all those different countries are, but it's certainly growing, and there are more and more countries who are legalising medicinal cannabis and opening up. It feels like every 6 months there's a new country that's opened up.
So you've got the foothold here at home in Australia, and you're taking over Europe. North America has got is kind of operating its own space. What about the US of A? Is that a market that you'd be looking at tapping into?
Certainly. US is quite different. It's federally not legal. So it's a very hard market to penetrate at the moment, and it is heavily saturated. It's quite bizarre to say it's federally illegal because I think 35 states in the US individually have legalized it, either for medicinal cannabis and, of course, recreational in some of the states as well. So to have it being federally illegal is quite difficult. So they still have issues with banking systems. A lot of them are cash jobs still, and they can't get backing by outsiders outside Australia, because it's not legal. So once that does open up, and it is definitely, we think that there's not too far away, let's say in the next couple of years, then it will be a very important market to tap into. And certainly on the CBD front, that's pretty close, because CBD, doesn't have that psychoactive component. So CBD can be imported into the US. So they're the areas that we are looking at currently.
You've got some partnerships. I've been doing some reading, which is quite clever, I think, partnerships with health funds, which means there's some benefit for consumers. Does that mean that they get some kind of rebate when they're taking on these medicines?
So HIF, so Health Insurance Fund of Australia. This was fabulous and a real turning point for the industry, I felt, because it was the first time that a private health insurance company publicly came out and declared their support for cannabis as a medicine. And this was a thrill for us because it was the stepping stone or the change that we needed in the industry to be recognised that, look, this is now a mainstream medicine. Cannabis has a role to play in the medical field. It is here to stay. And because of that, HIF decided that they were going to be different and sort of not only publicly declare their support, but I believe that they have allowed up to $105 back per script in terms of rebates for medicinal cannabis. Of course, I think you'd have to check in terms of eligibility and policies, etc. But the underlying message is that, well, hang on a second. Now that one company has done it, insurance company, many are likely to follow. And since that announcement, a few insurance companies have come out and said, look, we rebate as well. But of course, they weren't so vocal about it originally, but now that they are. So this is just great for patients in Australia, because it means that the cannabis medicines are being reduced because the insurance companies can see benefit in this as a therapy. So a huge turning point in our industry, because it also paves the way to the rest of the world. This says, hey, look at Australia. Australia is really setting the benchmark in terms of medicinal cannabis. And, this is probably quite likely to happen in many other jurisdictions as new countries open up. So really exciting and forward thinking on behalf of HIF.
Yes, and no doubt you would have had a small role to play in that, even if you might be a little bit modest in that, Fleta. Let's talk about your current equity position. What's your market cap now because of those recent acquisitions in Denmark?
Yeah, we just raised another 27 million on the back of that acquisition. So our market cap is sitting around the 200 million mark at the moment, which is a really nice position to be in. Yeah, we were sort of sitting around the 140 for a while. That's gone up not only with the ejection of funds, but of course, just on the announcement. The market really liked it. Our investors loved it. Of course, there were a few investors that were involved in this transaction. This transaction happened very quickly. It was one of those few transactions that you have to act now, and if you don't act within the next sort of week or two, you lose it. So it's not like we could go out and tell everybody about it. We had to secure the funds from a few select individuals or groups. And, so unfortunately we couldn't do an SPP. We can only do one of those every year. So not all of our shareholders got the opportunity to, but I'm sure afterwards when the announcement came out, they recognised, what had happened, and they were really positive towards it and can really see the long-term goal and vision of the company. So I guess it gives us confidence again in our strategy in terms of our vision and how we're moving overseas to achieve that.
Well, before we start to wrap things up, Fleta, let's just talk about that, your long-term vision and strategy. Fast forward 10 years' time, 2030 or 2031, where do you think the market will be? What do you think the attitude towards medicinal cannabis will be? How common will it be used day to day? You've obviously seen some projections and trajectories. Where do you see us in 10 years' time?
Oh, tough question. I think, already in Australia, we've seen cannabis used in over 200 different medical conditions. It's huge. So 215 medical conditions as of just last month. So, cannabis is here to stay. It definitely has a role to play. I think where we'll see things change will be how it's delivered. So instead of an oil, which is quite traditional at the moment, an oil that's orally absorbed, a lot of the companies will go, how do we differentiate and solve real patient problems? So what does that drug delivery look like? Is it a patch? Is it a tablet? Is it a capsule? Do we even go down the DNA route and look at, can we personalize cannabis medicines based on our own genetics, like blood makeup? Can we then say this particular cannabinoid, because there are over 100 different cannabinoids in medicinal cannabis plants. So if we can say, look, Peter, just based on this examination of your DNA, you suit this particular strain of cannabis or this particular cannabinoid for your condition. So to be able to do that in the future is what this company will see as the future. How long that will take, we don't know. Hopefully it's not 30 years. Hopefully it's closer to 5 to 10, because I think that's where this industry is going. And there's some really exciting research and development projects that are going to happen in this space. So I think medicinal cannabis has a very exciting future in all medical conditions.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you've sold me. Before we wrap things up, why should, shall we put it, ordinary mum and dad investors look at LGP, Little Green Pharma, as an investment option?
So look, I guess, so LGP, we have a very long-term and sound strategy. This is sort of proven, I guess, just recently by those biggest investment names in Australia that have backed us. So we're well funded. We have a very, a demonstrated business model. We've run a lean or a tight ship, so to speak. So we're very cost conscious, but we're focusing on revenue, because that's what's required now. I guess the market opportunity is huge. 24 billion is what we're looking at just in our target market alone at maturity. So that plays a huge role in our vision and our future. And finally, our capacity to deliver, thanks to this acquisition, we're not hamstrung now by any cultivation capacity, so we can deliver those volumes that we're talking about. And just finally, our track record of execution when it comes to our news flow and our milestone achievements. We're known for hitting our milestones, and that's not going to change.
Excellent. Well, look, we do wish you best of luck as the year rolls on, and no doubt we'll have you back on here soon to talk about any new adventures on the horizon. Fleta Solomon, CEO of Little Green Pharma, thanks for joining us on Small Caps today.
Thank you for having me. Lovely to chat.